Parenting for the Everyday, a podcast dedicated to meeting parents in the trenches of parenthood. We explore how our faith fits into our parenting. With the help of our guests, we are seeking practical tips on how the gospel can speak into our day-to-day parenting. From the easy stuff to the hard stuff, we want to talk about it all. This is Parenting for the Everyday. I'm Becca Alvarez.
And I'm Holly Dykandrew.
And today we are talking about such a relevant topic. I'm actually so excited about this topic because it's something that I feel quite a bit at different times, and I think that everyone has felt in all different seasons. We're talking about parent burnout. Today in the studio, we have our executive producer, Sarah, and of course, Holly. And we just want to have a really open and intimate conversation about how we have experienced parent burnout in our current seasons of parenting, and maybe other ways that other people are experiencing it too. So let's talk about it.
Should we just start out by saying, like, what do we mean when we say parent burnout? Like, try to define it?
Yeah, what is parent burnout?
Sarah, you are the one with the wisdom.
No, I'm not. That's not necessarily true. I've just been around longer. That's why. I think for me, when I think about parent burnout, I think the word itself, right, just kind of like defines it. But I just think exhaustion. Yeah. The idea of feeling weary. I think the idea of failure comes up right away, which we've all talked about that, right? Especially not only how we feel as moms, the failure, but just even failing our children. And if it just feels like you're not good enough. I don't know.
I think you hit
what do you guys think?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like that overwhelming fear that you aren't enough and you can't be enough and you'll never catch up and you're doing it wrong and you're tired and you're worn out, all the things.
Yeah. And I think that especially in the early seasons, from my experience, it felt like sometimes going to bed, I'd be laying in bed and feel like tomorrow's going to be the exact same. It's like Groundhog Day, and I don't know if I can do it. And having that fear of, I have these now 2 little ones that depend on me for everything. And if I'm not enough, what do I do? And just sitting in that fear and sadness as you're going to bed. And I think that might be it. That might be the burnout. we might have found
that feels accurate.
I feel like I even want to add, as you're talking, I want to add to this idea that it's that you're always worrying, right? So it's this worrying, and then that you don't love being a mom in that moment because it's really hard. And so when you're like, the day is going to be the same, I'm not doing it well, and you're not like, being a mom is the best thing ever. These little gifts are just so wonderful, and you start to feel like, oh, this is really hard, and I feel stuck, and I don't know what to do. And maybe that's more the realm that we're talking about.
I think what makes it so difficult too is like I really wanted to be a mom too, and so I think that any point that it gets hard, or I feel like having those feelings of like, oh man, maybe tomorrow it'd be kind of nice to have a break. I feel immediate guilt of like, but you wanted this. You wanted this and you asked for this and you invited this into your life and you want to have more of this. And what legitimizes your feelings if this is something that you wanted?
Yeah. So here's something interesting that I found on WebMD, because I was trying to do some research and thinking like, okay, this whole idea of just like being tired, isn't that part of just being a mom? Like they say, like you're just going to be tired for the next 18 years.
I think it might be longer.
Oh, cool. That's going to be fun.
I can tell you that is true.
And so it was like, what's the problem? Isn't this just what you signed up for? And WebMD said, the problem with parental burnout is that most people think that it's a normal part of parenting. What makes it worse is that burnout parents feel ashamed or guilty for being tired. Parental burnout leads to overwhelming exhaustion, emotional distancing from your children, and a sense of being a poor or ineffective parent. These effects can take a severe toll on your mental health.
Well, I like that next part too, that it can impact your relationship with your partner. Because I think that's so true too. Like once I am burnt out, I'm pretty burnt out across the board. Like it's pretty hard for me to do anything. If I'm real burnt out, like it's very difficult to get all tasks done and be a person to anyone else, including my partner.
Yeah, and so I wonder if we're even talking about here where it's like, of course, like being tired. You're getting up in the night with a baby, like being tired is normal. But there is a part where it switches to kind of a dangerous realm that can really affect your mental health.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what the danger probably is that you allow that to basically be your lens or your goggles with which you're seeing everything else, right? You're kind of letting this exhaustion or the guilt or the shame just carry over into every part of your life. And even, Holly, you mentioned this idea of like, maybe you feel like you're in this pit or hole that you just can't ever climb out. And so you're like, oh, I can't catch up. I can't ever do anything right. I'm actually, contributing to the negative health of my kid, whatever it is, like the mental state that you're in, like that is a very dangerous cycle, I think, for us to be in. And I think that's something that then obviously has an effect on our relationship with our spouse, right? And even obviously our kids, but like you said, just being anything to anyone, a daughter, a son, a brother or sister, whatever it is. So I think that is where, at least for me, having a personal relationship with the Lord is why it's so important, because that, I think what happens with parent burnout is that we are putting all of this pressure and all of these expectations on ourselves. And I think we really have to reorient how we view this idea of what it means to be a parent and what God has actually called us to do. And in his sovereignty, knowing what really is in our control and what is not. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, I also like that you use the words like guilt and shame, because I think that is a really big piece that comes along with this burnout that we're talking about, especially in a Christian community where you feel like, oh man, I'm supposed to be a mom and this is what my purpose is. And, I'm not doing it well enough, or I don't like it today. And feeling that negativity, then like all the guilt and shame start to creep in, and then it just kind of spirals.
And I think that, to your point, Sarah and Holly, that parent burnout can manifest itself in so many different symptoms that, yes, it is fatigue, but it can also be seen in impatience, in rage, in irritability, overstimulation. And I think when you're feeling those can be really, really powerful feelings and have like this impact of maybe something's wrong with me. It's not just that I can feel tired and know like this is related because I'm not getting sleep, but I have this rage that is coming out in ways that I never thought that it ever would, and I've never experienced this before. So how do I deal with that feeling, and then how do I even share that if that's such a scary thing to share?
And even rage sounds like a scary word to me.
Is
like, oh, did I rage? I feel like I can definitely relate to when you say like, oh, I'm really irritable.
Yeah.
Like that irritability part. Yes. It's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Me.
Well, and I think for me, I especially with my kids, they're older. I think that sometimes the frustration or impatience where you have spent years and years and years, right, putting into your kids, loving them well, discipling them, hopefully walking alongside, trying to help them, see what the Bible says about how they should live their lives and all these things. And when you see them make like a bad decision or a bad choice and they're older and you're not, I don't have complete control over you like I did when you were 3. I think some of my frustration and impatience really unhealthily comes out in ways where I'm super negative or critical of them. And I'm actually not allowing or giving myself the opportunity to parent them well in that. Like, that's not helping them. I did it last night with my daughter. And my husband just looked at me like I think he's trying to give me the eye, when you're supposed to do that, but like, okay, take it down a level. Of course, this was a conversation I'm having at about 10 o'clock at night. Probably shouldn't have been doing that. And then in the end, it wasn't even that big of a deal. But I created that. And that wasn't necessarily a symptom of parent burnout as much as it was other things that were going on in my life, just being exhausted from working all day and doing some different things like that. And so I think it's important to even recognize, well, what other things are contributing to this? Even I know we're talking about parental burnout specifically, but just burnout in your own life, which is going to be translated in the way you're parenting, right?
Well, yeah, I was just about to say, if you're burnt out at work, that would translate to parental burnout because you have less to give when you come home or when you are engaging.
And the fact is, we shouldn't, again, as followers of Jesus, like, if we're prioritizing correctly, right? We are like, hey, God's at the top of my list, and then my spouse, and then my kids, and then everything after that. And I feel like what happens, at least for me, is I just flip it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, work, ministry, whatever's up here, and then maybe God, and then really my family's getting the worst part of me, and that's not good.
So what I'm hearing, Sarah, is that this whole idea that we're talking about, this parental burnout, it doesn't go away as our kids get older.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things that I never want to say to parents of younger kids to discourage them, like, hey, this season of life, I know it is. I think it feels physically exhausting because you are doing so many of those things for your kids, the feeding them and putting them to bed, bathing them, like they are very, very dependent on you. But as your kids get older, obviously those needs don't exist as much anymore. But then it becomes like you're moving into the worlds of, wow, I mean, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual exhaustion, which I have just found to be extremely challenging. I liked it when I could pretty much control every part of my child's life. And I think part of that is just because it's scary.
Yeah.
You're giving up a lot of that control, even if it was perceived and not real, And so I think at least for Matt and I, we've really had to learn how to get on our knees and release that and acknowledge the fact, like, hey, parenting is about the long game. We're not just trying to do these quick fixes where once they turn 18, you're like, okay, it's good. I'm done. I've done it. I mean, life's just sort of beginning for them at that age. And you're hoping they're taking everything you've put into them and being able to navigate the world around them. But that parental burnout, wow, it kind of hits a new level at that stage.
Cool.
I know. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. I feel like I'm in that transition season where it's like I have little kids that need me less, and we're getting into some of these heart issues, and I feel it. I feel that what keeps me up at night, they're heavy things, and it all contributes to this burnout.
If you're just listening to this, you didn't see it, but Sarah was making direct eye contact with me and like empathetically looking at me in the eyes of like, oh, you sweet child, you have yet to see what this is going to be like. But I do think it is just such a gracious thing of the way that the Lord has kind of created parents with kids, is that you really do learn in each stage. And each stage is difficult in its own way. I remember when I was a new mom with Ezekiel and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And now I look back on it and be like, that was actually quite a bit easier than what I'm experiencing right now.
Correct.
But I had to go through that to get to where I am now. And I think that if you are a parent of young kids or whatever season you're in, you have the hardships that are unique for that season, and you are being prepared for the hardships that are yet to come.
Incredibly traumatizing if we had a Benjamin Button type of situation going on. Like, can you imagine if you're like give birth and it's like an adult and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do you do?
This podcast is taking a different direction.
I know. I'm sorry.
We're bringing it back.
Sorry.
I feel like we should switch to even talking about, like, what do we do? Yeah. So how do we be healthy moms and healthy parents and individuals through this parental burnout topic?
I think that something that is so helpful is talking about it. I think if there's ever something negative in someone's life, the longer that you hold it and keep it from others, the deeper and darker it grows. I think something like parent burnout, sharing that with people and letting each other know, like, hey, I'm really struggling in this season. I'm really having a hard time and I need help and support. And that almost always brings light in, and other people can see you and support you and help you back up. And I feel like especially with parent burnout, there's so much guilt and shame associated with it. It's not something that we want to let other people into. Even as we're talking, there's such a big part of me that wants to be like, but I'm actually doing okay. Everyone listening, I'm doing okay. But the truth is that it's hard. It is hard. And it's something that we need to be able to share with each other without feeling like you have to put a disclaimer on it.
Yeah, I always say I think isolation is one of the enemy's number one tools that he uses. And so I think you're so spot on in like making sure that you can share it. But I also think that means with the Lord too.
Yes.
I think we sometimes want to be embarrassed when we're like, hey, Lord, this was really hard. And I know it's not a big deal, but today felt hard to me. And so being able to just take your raw feelings and pray through them and surround yourself with a community that you can also like have a good friend that you could be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling.
Yeah. I feel like you need to have those friends too who you can be pretty honest and vulnerable with and not feel like they're going to judge me or say anything. And not that it's going to become a space where you're just constantly complaining and feeding into that, but you're just able to say like, yeah, this was really hard and not having to feel like I have to put a disclaimer on it or say I'm okay. It's just we live in such a weird culture where we're like, nope, we got to put our best foot forward and make sure everyone knows that we're okay. You know, our social media culture doesn't help with that at all. I don't see many people being super honest or vulnerable around parent burnout.
Yeah.
Or where they feel like they're messing up or any of that. And I think we talked about this kind of offline, but I think that's a real danger, especially in the church, in the Christian culture. I think we feel that if we admit to that, even if it's, around something really hard, a failure, whatever, that other people are going to judge us or not think we're as spiritual, or maybe we're not relying on the Lord like we should be and all these things. And that's where I just go, oh man, like I think that contributes to the isolation that people feel. And really, if anybody, we as a church community should be surrounding each other and trying to spur each other on and encourage each other, because I just want to say, like, you are not alone.
Yeah.
Like, this happens to everyone, and your kids are not robots.
And they're not perfect either. And they won't
really
be perfect.
That's what I mean. They're going to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
They are going to mess up, and it's going to have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
But why do we, as soon as our kids do mess up or something happens, I would look at Matt and go, oh, wow.
What did we do?
What did we do wrong?
Yeah.
We're such a failure. Why is that our first reaction? Right. And of course, then that contributes to the burnout, because you're feeling like, well, I'm a failure.
It's a hamster wheel. Yeah.
It is. We got to get off the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, too, of a recent sermon of talking about the church and how important it is to not be using this constant comparison with other people to help make yourself feel better. So I think that as a church community, it's also taking accountability for yourself and making sure that you're not looking at other people in order to level up or play that comparison game. Because the more that we do that to each other, the more we're going to hide from each other, too, because you have to put on a good face so that no one thinks that you're not doing as well as you want them to think you are.
Yeah, a social media cleanse. I think you need to.
I really do need to do that.
I just have done this within the last 6 months, and it's so great. And then it gets bogged down again.
What does that look like practically?
I think you go through and you look at the accounts that you are following, and you say, does this person, whether it's a Instagram influencer or whether it's just someone in your life, does this person add to my burnout? Does this person make me feel worse about myself? And they might not even mean to do it.
Right.
But when I see this account, do I leave feeling like I need to buy something? I need to do something better. I need to change something. I need to make my house look a certain way. I need to dress a certain way. If those are the cases, that's probably not a good mental space. And so making sure that the people you follow are encouraging and joyful and add to more positivity in your life.
That's really good.
It's hard because right now Instagram will suggest people to you, and you can turn that off. And I think you just have to be careful of intentionally watching your feed.
But Becca, what do you do when you're feeling the burnout?
Yeah. I think for me, there's a couple of things that are really, really helpful to keep me from burning out. And some of that is every day I take time for myself. That time for me happens to be working out, and that is a lot of my mental health, and that helps me a ton. Those are an hour and a half where no one needs me, no one's asking me for anything, no one's even saying my name. And so those are really, really, really helpful times for me. And I have great people in my life. My husband's super supportive of giving me that time. I have my parents that are available to watch my kids at different times. So that's super helpful for me because I'm in such a dependent stage with my children. I love being there for them, but I'm a better mom when I'm able to pour into myself before pouring into them.
Yeah, I think we underestimate how much our physical and our emotional health and spiritual health are all tied together. So when one of those is out of whack, it affects the other one. So even just making good choices physically, watching what we eat, what we drink, when we're feeling burnt out, like what do we go to? Is it chocolate? Is it wine? I'm not speaking from personal experience, hypothetically.
But I do think it is really good to
true.
identify that stuff, because I think there are like habits we tend to just create, and we are not mindful around them. And so you just are like, I'm going to have a glass of wine. And again, is that wrong? No. But if that is a coping mechanism because of burnout, I would probably go, all right, that feels unhealthy, because you're not actually trying to solve the issue. You're just kind of trying to cope, or mask it or whatever. But so I think that's a really
and even
good
it could be
thought.
it could. Looking at what you go to doesn't necessarily have to be food or drink. So for me, sometimes it's TV, right? I want to mentally check out. So I'm
just escape, right?
Right. And so being cognizant to say, no, let's not do that. Let's work through what I'm feeling. Let's go for a walk. Let me engage in a conversation with my spouse instead of just checking out. And that feels hard. It feels hard to be like, I don't want to do those things. And so again, talking about it, acknowledging it. And then I'm also like I really don't like big resolutions, these big lofty goals of we're going to change our entire life tomorrow. And I just think like January, everybody's doing all the things, and by February you're back to your normal. Right. And so I'm like, maybe the goal is that we just pick one small habit that we can start to intentionally bring to our lives and our day-to-day, or one small change, and then that can grow into something bigger.
Yeah, and I think that that's the only way that changes really happen, is not necessarily going to the lofty goal. I think they're like little Legos that you build on top of each other. Back to our kind of negative coping styles too, I think that if anything is making you feel worse about yourself after, which is often when you're in burnout, the things that you reach for, because it's kind of an immediate satisfaction but long-term guilt, then that's not a proper coping mechanism for you, and it won't benefit you in the long run. And trying to keep an eye on that. And that, like you said, that doesn't have to just be food and drink. That can be, for me, that's social media. Like I can tell that I'm zoning out because I'm looking at social media over and over and over again. And I feel crappy at the end of the day, but I still go to it because it's mind numbing and everything. And so trying to work in a different habit to relieve my mind but not make me feel bad would be my challenge.
I think that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. I think, honestly, just checking out, period.
Yeah.
Right? I think that there is a temptation, right, to almost self-isolate and just kind of, I know that for myself, sometimes I'll just be like, I'm just going to go to my bedroom, right, shut the door. And that can be okay to if you recognize, hey, I kind of just need a timeout. Because I think I'm not going to be able to have wisdom around my words right now, or control maybe my frustration and be able to extend grace. But I think I have found that I can also just like kind of hold myself into that spot, whether it's a bedroom, wherever, and just I don't know, shut the doors and not do. And I think that is also not healthy, because you're just kind of like, well, I'm not going to deal with it.
Right. You're avoiding.
Yeah. So, and I think this is, again, I love to be the, PK Christian cliche person, but I think we would all agree, like, you need to be spending time with the Lord in His Word every day, surrounding yourself with the truth of who you are, who your kids are, who your spouse is, because if you can have a proper perspective, that's going to change how you see everything. That's how you're going to see yourself as a parent, as a spouse, because it's not you. Our kids are really gifts that God has given us to steward well. And of course, we're sinful human beings. We're going to fail. We're going to mess up. But God is faithful and good and sovereign, and He will be with us. It's really interesting that we are doing this episode because there have been some really hard things in parenting for Matt and I in the last, month or so. And he sent me this quote to encourage me, and it was so poignant for this. So I just wanted to share. I don't know if you know the Green Ember series.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great book series if you don't know it. But S.D. Smith is the author. And he gives this quote. He says, "I'm also learning how impossible it is for me to adequately protect and provide for those I love. I'm learning more that Christ is our protector and provider, and I'm called to be a servant to my family with the gifts and capacities I have. And I'm profoundly limited. So I must, as a habit, turn to God and turn over to Him the anxieties that threaten to wreck me every day. His strength is made perfect in my weakness."
Man, I think that's the perfect way to wrap it up.
That's a mic drop right there.
Yeah. I know. I was like crying as I was reading it. It was really good.
No, but
it's a good reminder.
So much truth there.
Yeah.
So I think that is the perfect way to end this episode.
Yeah, and I think that reminding parents that when you are feeling burnt out, to go back to the truth. Our minds trick us into very irrational things. And so always remembering what's true. And that is that you are doing your best, but you are limited, but our sovereign God is not. So rest in that today. And thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Parenting for the Everyday. Tune in next time.